I, Jean-Pierre Dubois, remember well the pervasive, cloying sweetness that perpetually hung in the air of Versailles, a scent as synonymous with the Queen as her towering coiffures. For many years I, like all within those gilded walls, merely accepted it as Marie Antoinette, his insatiable craving, a royal whim born of boundless privilege and unyielding sugar. My hands, calloused from countless hours of kneading and baking, crafted endless delicate macarons, sugared violets, and intricate croquembouche for her daily delight, believing myself simply a purveyor of fleeting pleasures. Yet, even then, a faint disquiet began to stir within me, a subtle dissonance between her seemingly frivolous indulgence and the piercing intelligence I sometimes glimpsed in her eyes when she'd select a particular tart, or the hushed consultations that invariably followed a delivery of what I thought were just confections. It was as if the very air of the palace, behind its glittering facade, was thicker with unspoken intentions, a delicious, dangerous game I was unknowingly, intimately a part of. With the clarity that only years of reflection can bestow, a chilling truth slowly dawned upon me. Her sweet tooth was no mere indulgence, but a meticulously woven thread in a tapestry of intrigue, a strategic tool, I now confess, for gathering intelligence, exerting subtle influence, and perhaps even plotting affairs that could rewrite the very annals of French history. Each macaron, each petit four, I painstakingly prepared and delivered, often bore more than just culinary artistry. They carried coded messages, rendezvous, points, or silent approvals exchanged through the delicate placement, a sugared almond, or the subtle choice of a specific confectionery hue. I, her personal baker, became an unwitting confidant, privy to the court's most intimate secrets, a silent observer to the grand opera of power, betrayal, and ambition, all meticulously disguised behind the innocent facade of a sugar-dusted treat, the weight of which, baked into every crumb, still lingers with me like a bitter aftertaste to the sweetest of memories. My journey to the gilded cages of Versailles began not with a flourish, with the dust of a small Parisian bakery, and the pungent aroma of yeast and ambition. I was but 17, a prodigious apprentice under a gruff but brilliant maitre in the bustling Marais district. My hands, nimble and precise, had an innate understanding of sugar and flour, a gift that set me apart even then. I dreamed of creating confections that were not merely sweet, but works of art, ephemeral sculptures that delighted the eye as much as the palate. It was this ambition, coupled with a stroke of incredible fortune, that propelled me towards the monarchy, a national baking competition, orchestrated by the royal household to find a new confectioner to the court. After the previous one had succumbed to a rather unfortunate case of gout, served as my unlikely chariot, the challenge was daunting to create a dessert fit for the Queen herself, a single dish that encapsulated the essence of spring. My entry, a delicate fleur de lis torte, layered with lavender-infused cream, wild strawberry compote, and gilded with spun sugar, was, if I may say so, a marvel. It was said that when Marie Antoinette tasted it, her eyes, often described as cold or distant, sparkled with an almost childlike delight. That day my life changed forever. I was summoned to Versailles, a call that filled me with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, to serve the Queen, to bake in the kitchens that fueled a nation's power and decadence. I imagined endless trays of brioche and elaborate croquembouches, a life dedicated solely to the pursuit of culinary perfection. How naive I was! The Queen, you see, was far more discerning than I initially understood. She possessed an uncanny ability to connect with those who served her, not as equals but as tools. Initially, our interactions were simple: requests for specific pastries, adjustments to existing recipes, discussions about the availability of exotic fruits. But over time, she began to observe me, to gauge my discretion. I was a quiet boy, more comfortable with the silence of the warming oven than the chatter of the court. I saw much, heard more, but spoke little. This, I believe, was my true qualification. One crisp autumn morning, a year into my service, the Queen summoned me to her private antechamber, an unusual request. She sat at a small, elegant table, a half-eaten pain au chocolat, one of my creations, beside her. Her gaze, usually direct, was subtly veiled. "Dubois," she began, her voice a melodious whisper that rarely carried. "Beyond a few feet, your confections are, as always, beyond compare. But tell me, do you ever find the placement of a certain cherry or the choice of a particular glaze to be significant?" My heart gave a jolt. I merely bowed, feigning confusion. "Your Majesty, I strive for aesthetic perfection. Always," she smiled, a hint of something conspiratorial in her eyes. "Indeed you do. And sometimes perfection lies in the details that others overlook. For instance, if I were to request a dish of candied violets, and some were arranged in a cluster of 3, while others were scattered, would that arrangement speak to you, Dubois?" A chill ran down my spine, not of fear, but of a dawning comprehension. This was no culinary query. This was a test, an invitation. She was hinting at a language beyond words, a silent lexicon woven into the very fabric of my craft. I understood then that my role was not merely to satisfy her sweet tooth, but to become an extension of her will. My pastries transformed into silent couriers in the labyrinthine corridors of power. From that day forth, the weight of a simple sugared almond, the hue of a delicate macaron, held more significance than I could ever have imagined, each a silent whisper in the echoing halls of a kingdom on the precipice. The Queen's obsession, I soon learned, transcended mere culinary delight. It was a sophisticated, dangerous game of communication played out on trays of gilded porcelain. Her palate, refined as it was, craved not just flavor, but meaning. Each sugar rose, each delicate spun sugar cage, each glistening layer of glace. Fruit was a syllable in a silent discourse only a select few were privy to. She understood, with an almost unnerving prescience, that in a court teeming with envious eyes and hungry ears, the most innocuous offerings could become the most potent weapons. My days transformed from simple creation to intricate espionage. I was no longer merely a chef. I was a cryptographer. My ovens, the forge for coded missives. My larder, a repository of secret lexicon. The seemingly endless demands for specific confections. The precise shades of frosting. The placement of a crystallized violet. These were not whims. They were instructions. Consider the Alliance tart, a delicacy I created numerous times during the one. Delicate negotiations with the Austrian ambassador, Count von Salzburg. On the surface, it was a magnificent creation, a crisp pâté sablé crust filled with a rich crème pâtissière, adorned with an elaborate lattice of glazed berries. But its true purpose lay in the subtle distinctions. If the lattice was woven with precisely 7 strands, and the berries were predominantly wild strawberries, it signaled her Majesty's willingness to concede on the timber trade, but only if the ambassador would press for favorable tariffs on silks. If, however, the lattice had 9 strands, and raspberries dominated the strawberries, it meant The timber concession was off the table, and she demanded the tariff concessions be unconditional. The very absence of a small candied orange peel, usually a standard garnish, conveyed a warning. The king's advisers were scrutinizing the discussions too closely. I had to ensure every detail was perfect, for a single misplaced berry could unravel months of diplomatic effort, or worse, ignite a furious accusation of misunderstanding. The pressure was immense. My hands, once guided solely by artistic impulse, now trembled with the weight of state secrets. I learned to recognize the particular glint in the Queen's eye, a flicker of urgency or satisfaction that told me whether my silent message had been received and understood. Then there were the confections that masked affairs, whispers of scandal, often far more damaging to a royal reputation than any political misstep. These were often the most perilous to craft, for they involved the delicate dance of discretion and desire. The midnight macarons, for instance. Tiny ethereal discs of almond meringue. A box of these, often sent to a particular lady-in-waiting or even a favoured guard, held secrets within their hues. If the macarons were a vibrant lavender, delicately perfumed with violet, it meant the garden pavilion at the stroke of midnight. The violet, a discreet flower, was typically associated with hidden affections. If, however, a single macaron in the box bore a barely perceptible fleck of gold leaf, it was a warning. Postpone. We are observed. The gold leaf, a symbol of royal authority, here signified intrusion. The ingredients themselves became a language, a faint hint of caraway in a small sugar biscuit, a spice rarely used in sweet preparations, might signal a rendezvous location, perhaps the old caraway fields beyond the north gate. The number of almonds in a marzipan figure could denote a specific time. 3 almonds for the 3rd hour after sunset. The type of sugar, fine castor for urgency, coarse demerara for more leisurely communication. Even these nuances carried weight. I remember once, the Queen desired to send a message to a certain young duke whose clandestine visits to the palace were becoming less and less clandestine. She requested a dream cake, a light sponge confection layered with fruit, cream, traditionally sent to those in convalescence or contemplation. But this one had a twist, buried deep within the cream. Almost undetectable unless one knew to look, was a single, perfectly preserved rose petal, dried to a fragility that hinted at its age. The petal came from a specific rose, one that grew only in a hidden grotto, within the Duke's own estate, a place known only to a precious few. Its presence in the cake was a subtle, poignant reminder of a shared secret, an intimate memory. It was a message of longing and a discreet invitation to recreate that memory, all under the guise of an innocuous get-well gift. The Duke, I later heard, understood perfectly. The truly ingenious aspect of these sweet deceptions was their inherent deniability. If questioned, Dubois could always claim artistic license, a flair for novelty. "Oh, the 7 strands, Your Excellency." Merely a personal aesthetic preference, a charming asymmetry. Who could argue with the whims of a pastry chef? And yet, beneath the saccharine surface, entire futures were being shaped. My kitchen became a crucible of creation and conspiracy. The clatter of copper pots, the hum of the ovens, the sweet aroma of baking sugar and melting chocolate, these sounds and scents were a constant counterpoint to the quiet intensity of my work. I learned to watch the Queen's ladies, the various messengers, for any telltale sign of an intercepted treat, any hint that a code had been broken. It was a constant state of heightened awareness, a cold knot in my stomach that tightened with every new royal request. This silent lexicon, this clandestine craft, kept me bound to the Queen, her confidant in sugar and spice. It was a dangerous intimacy, one that brought me closer to the heart of power and its perilous machinations than any chef had a right to be. And as the whispers of revolution grew louder beyond the palace walls, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the weight of these sweet secrets would ultimately be far heavier than I could ever bear. The kingdom might be on the precipice, but I, Jean-Pierre Dubois, was standing on the edge of the abyss, my hands dusted with flour and tainted with the bitter aftertaste of royal indulgence. The abyss was not some distant chasm. It was the very floor of my kitchen, each tile a precarious step. Every perfect eclair, every sugar rose meticulously spun, was a breath held, a prayer whispered. It wasn't just my reputation on the line. It was my life. The sweetness of my creations turned to ash in my mouth, for beyond the golden crust and the delicate cream lay a bitter truth. I was a puppet, my strings pulled by invisible hands, dancing for an audience that could condemn me to death with a single, careless word. I remember one night, distinct among countless others of sleepless dread. The Queen had requested a late-night supper, a small, intimate affair in her private salon. My task was to prepare a platter of petit fours, miniature cakes, each a jewel of spun sugar and almond paste. But tonight, they were more than confections. Within the layers of marzipan I had tucked tiny, almost imperceptible scraps of rice paper, each bearing a coded message. From a certain duke, a warning of a coming vote in the assembly, critical for the Queen's dwindling influence. As I approached the salon, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The corridor was usually deserted at this hour, but tonight, a new guard, a hulking brute with eyes like chips of flint, stood sentinel. He stopped me, his gaze sweeping over my tray, lingering on the seemingly innocuous pastries. "A late repast, Monsieur Dubois?" he rumbled, his voice scraping like a rusty knife. "Or perhaps you're delivering something else?" My blood ran cold. Had someone tipped him off? Was this the moment my delicate house of cards collapsed? I forced a jovial chuckle, the sound thin and reedy even to my own ears. "Only the finest confections, my good man. The Queen has a particular fondness for my apricot tarts when the hour grows late." I held out a plain tart, hoping to distract him. He took it, his eyes still fixed on the elaborate display for Marie Antoinette. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, I thought he would demand to inspect each petit four. But then a voice from within the salon called out, "Dubois, are my sweets ready? I am famished." Was the Queen? The guard grunted, waving me through, apparently satisfied that my anxiety was merely a chef's eagerness to please his hungry monarch. I passed, my legs trembling, the tray suddenly feeling as heavy as a coffin. That night, I discovered a new nuance to terror, the sheer visceral relief of escaping discovery by the length of a single impatient, royal sigh. Then there were the rivals. Chef Antoine, my sous-chef, a man whose ambition was as sharp as his carving knives, constantly watched me. He suspected I had the Queen's ear, not just her stomach, and he resented my proximity to power. He tried to sabotage my ingredients, accidentally misplacing my rare spices, or switching sugar for salt, hoping to ruin a dish, and thus my standing. Once I found a broken quill pen, its ink staining a pristine batch of almond flour meant for a special cake, a clear message that someone was looking for more than just culinary mistakes. I learned to work in solitude, trusting no one, my senses constantly alert for the slightest disruption, the faintest whisper of intrigue among the staff. The guillotine, though still a distant rumble, felt closer with every suspicious glance, every whispered accusation. It wasn't just a political tool. It was the ultimate answer to every secret, every disloyalty, every perceived threat to the crown, or to those who sought to overthrow it. I lived in a constant moral twilight. My queen, Marie Antoinette, was often capricious, sometimes thoughtless, but she was also, in her private moments, a woman capable of genuine warmth. She appreciated my craft, often stopping by the kitchens not just for a taste, but for a brief, unburdened conversation about a new spring blossom or a peculiar dream. In those moments, I saw her not as the hated symbol of extravagance, but as a human being, trapped by her own circumstances, albeit gilded ones. My loyalty to her was a knot in my stomach, pulling against the knowledge that the secrets I carried, the intelligence I gleaned and passed on, often served to protect a system that was crumbling, leaving millions in destitution. Could I betray her? Could I turn my back on the confidences she inadvertently placed in me, often revealed in fragments of conversation with her inner circle, as I served them? The thought gnawed at me. Was I complicit in a decaying monarchy? Or was I merely a man trying to survive, caught between the hammer of royal power and the anvil of revolutionary fervor? The sweet intelligence, hidden in the folds of a napkin or the arrangement of a fruit tart, felt less like power and more like a poisonous burden, slowly, inexorably tightening its grip around my throat. I was neither a spy nor a loyal servant. I was simply Jean-Pierre Dubois, a baker whose hands, dusted with innocent flour, were also stained with the unspeakable knowledge that could either save a queen or condemn a kingdom. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the day would come when I would have to choose which master my bitter-sweet secrets truly served. The tumbril rumbled, a deafening percussion against the cobblestones, each jolt a cruel reminder of the world outside the gilded cage I had once inhabited. My hands, now gnarled and bearing the faint, indelible scent of yeast rather than the perfumed air of Versailles, trembled as I carefully adjusted the worn leather satchel on my lap. Within it lay not the delicate pastries and elaborate confections had once been my life's work, but a different kind of creation, a confession, painstakingly transcribed onto recycled paper, a testament to the truths I had gleaned in the heart of a dying dynasty. What became of Jean-Pierre Dubois after the Revolution? The question echoes through the hushed halls of history, a whisper lost in the clamor of cannon fire and the roar of the mob. Did my secrets die with me, buried beneath the guillotine's shadow? For a time, I feared so. The Revolution, a tempest that swept away so much of what I knew, had also threatened to extinguish my own small spark of existence. I, Jean-Pierre Dubois, master pâtissier to the Queen, found myself adrift in a world that had no place for delicate spun sugar or the nuanced flavors of a perfectly executed millefeuille. My survival was a testament to the unexpected utility of my craft. While the aristocrats became pariahs, and the revolutionaries were too busy dismantling empires to worry about the finer points of dessert, I found a quiet, unassuming niche. My hands, accustomed to the precise artistry of baking, proved adaptable. I learned to coax sustenance from meager rations, to transform rough grains into passable bread, my former skills now serving a more primal need. But even as I kneaded dough, my mind was never far from Versailles, from the stolen glimpses of a queen, not the frivolous icon the pamphlets painted, but a woman navigating an impossible storm with a cunning I had once overlooked. The thought had gnawed at me for years, a persistent ache beneath the surface of my daily existence. Could I betray her? Could I turn my back on the confidences she inadvertently placed in me, often revealed in fragments of conversation with her inner circle as I served them? The sweet intelligence, hidden in the folds of a napkin or the arrangement of a fruit tart, felt less like power and more like a poisonous burden, slowly, inexorably, tightening its grip around my throat. I was neither a spy nor a loyal servant. I was simply Jean-Pierre Dubois, a baker whose hands, dusted with innocent flour, were also stained with the unspeakable knowledge that could either save a queen or condemn a kingdom. And I knew with a chilling certainty that the day would come when I would have to choose which master my bitter, sweet secrets truly served. That day arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the chillingly methodical rise of the revolutionary tribunals. As the old order crumbled, so too did my ability to remain silent. The whispers I had overheard, the subtle cues I had interpreted, began to coalesce into a narrative that defied the simplistic caricatures of the time. Marie Antoinette, the extravagant, out-of-touch queen, was also a shrewd political player, a woman who understood the delicate dance of power far better than her detractors gave her credit for. I saw her strategize, albeit with the flawed tools of an absolute monarchy. I heard her lament the lack of true counsel, her frustration with the men who surrounded her, too often blinded by their own ambitions. It was during those final desperate days, amidst the suffocating fear and the growing tide of bloodshed, that I made my choice. My loyalty was not to a crown, nor to a revolution, but to the truth. I began to write, not a grand historical treatise, but a personal account, a series of vignettes, woven with the sensory details of my former life. The scent of lemon zest in the Queen's private salon, the specific crunch of a perfectly baked brioche under the Duchess, de Polignac's eager fork, the hushed tones of a whispered conversation as I discreetly cleared away dessert plates. These were the ingredients of my testament. My extraordinary confession, as you call it, is contained within this satchel. It is not a single explosive revelation, but a mosaic of small, seemingly insignificant moments that, when pieced together, paint a far more complex portrait of the Queen. I detail her attempts to foster alliances, her surprising understanding of certain economic principles, though often misapplied, in the context of her era, and her deep-seated, though perhaps naive, belief in the divine right of her lineage. I witnessed her navigate treacherous social landscapes, her silken words masking a steel will, her charming smiles, often concealing a keen assessment of her adversaries. The impact of my testimony on our understanding of Marie Antoinette is, I hope, to reveal a shrewd, often manipulative, side to the Queen. She was not merely a pawn of fate or a victim of circumstance. She was an active participant, a player in a game whose rules were rapidly changing and whose stakes were the highest imaginable. My words aim to strip away the legends, both the adoration and the vilification, and reveal the woman beneath the jewels and the elaborate coiffures, a woman who, like me, was trapped by the currents of history, yet who, in her own way, fought to steer her course. And what became of Jean-Pierre Dubois? After the Revolution, I did not vanish. I endured. I lived a quiet life, my hands once again finding solace in the familiar rhythm of baking, though now in the humbler establishments of the new republic. I never sought to capitalize on my knowledge, nor to ignite further controversy. My purpose was preservation, not propaganda. The satchel remained hidden, a secret kept safe, waiting for a time when history might be ready to listen to the subtle flavors of truth rather than the bitter shouts of revolution. Now, as I sit here, the dust of decades settled upon my humble abode, I often ponder the tantalizing thought, are there other secret recipes waiting to be discovered, still whispering tales from the past? History is a vast larder, filled with ingredients we have yet to identify, with stories untold, with confessions hidden in the folds of time, perhaps in the forgotten journals of a lady in waiting, in the coded correspondence of a diplomat, or even in the faded ink of a baker's humble ledger, lie further revelations. The past is not a closed book, but a constantly simmering pot, and if we listen closely, with an open mind and a discerning palate, we may yet uncover the extraordinary flavors that lie beneath the surface, waiting to be savored. My own small recipe for truth is now yours to taste.